Hello dear friends. In this video I am going to show you two scary stories. Here is the first story. The story of the Midnight Dwarves. Mr. Abboud has been working as a baker in one of the bakeries for more than 20 years. And Mr. Abboud is proud of his craft in which he grew up, despite what Mr. Abboud went through in life. As he did not know the meaning of childhood, he enjoys his craft every day. Mr. Abboud's sons. Mr. Abboud had 5 children. The youngest was called Yunus, who was 6 years old, and his eldest son, Abdel Jalal, worked in a carpentry workshop. His eldest daughter, Zainab, dreamed of joining the university after passing the high school exam. As for Malik, her younger sister, she used to work in sewing and tailoring, and she helps her mother in this work in order to earn money. And he had a son named Samir, who had dropped out of school and refused to learn any craft that would be a source of livelihood for him. Mr. Abboud is a loyal husband to his wife. Mr. Abboud was loyal to his wife, Batul, and he had all the love and respect for her because she endured the hardship of living with him and even tried her best to help him earn money. Mr. Abboud thought, despite the harshness of life, that he was one of the happiest of God's creatures on the face of the earth. And perhaps that happiness is what made him steadfast for many years in front of the burning mouth of the oven. The nature of Mr. Abboud's work forced him to stay late at night in the oven, and sometimes even spend the whole night until morning in front of the oven. His wife, Batul, did not worry about his absence from home or his late return. One day, Mr. Abboud went out of the house, and he had to prepare bread for cafes and restaurants. So he told his wife that he would spend the night in the oven and would return home the next morning. Mr. Abboud went to spend his night in the oven, and the movement in the street was almost non-existent. And he was used to stay up at night with a friend of Abdel Mughith, who owns a coffee shop located in front of Mr. Abboud's bakery. Abdel Mughith was Mr. Abboud's close friend. But on this day Mr. Abboud was absent from the coffee shop, and Mr. Abboud did not meet him. So he spent the night hours alone in the bakery without a friend or companion. Midnight cigarette. Mr. Abboud decided to spend the night alone in front of the oven, listening to the radio. So Mr. Abboud put the bread inside the oven and stood smoking a black tobacco cigarette in front of the oven door. Mr. Abboud entered the oven after finishing smoking his cigarette, and he thought he saw someone climbing the steps of Mr. Abdul's Cafe El Mughith. So he hurried to the coffee shop and called in a low voice, "Abd El Mughith, Abd El Mughith." Then he remembered that Mr. Abd El Mughith did not come today for coffee. So he went back to the oven and sat down to finish preparing the bread. And while he was busy turning the bread, he heard a voice. "I want bread. I want bread." Abboud went to the oven door, opened the door, and no one was standing. So Mr. Abboud said to himself, maybe he has passed. So Mr. Abboud entered the oven again, sat listening to Mrs. Kulthum's songs on the radio, took out another cigarette, and sat enjoying his night alone. Mr. Abboud lost consciousness. Mr. Abboud heard the voice again. "I want bread. I want bread." But this time the voice came from inside. Mr. Abboud crept into the oven, feeling very afraid. Mr. Abboud thought that the sound was the voice of a hungry genie. So he grabbed a piece of bread, he threw it on the ground, and at some point, dwarfs appeared to him, dancing and jumping. So he felt a shudder sweep over him and a fear that he could not control. Mr. Abboud ran out of the oven and lost consciousness. A passerby rushed to carry Mr. Abboud to the hospital, and the doctor examined Mr. Abboud and took a sample of his urine, blood, and administered the necessary first aid to Mr. Abboud until he regained consciousness. The doctor asked him if he was taking any kind of drugs, but Mr. Abboud denied and told him that he had smoked cigarettes. The truth about Mr. Abboud's hallucinations. The doctor took a cigarette to examine it, and it turned out that it contained a hallucinogenic substance, which had been sold to him by mistake from a merchant in the town. so that he would oblige his customers to return to him and buy more of it. To the cafe of Mr. Abdul Mughith, and the shop owner, who sold cigarette packs with hallucinogenic substance, was arrested. Story 2: Backdoor Story. Backdoor Man is a scary story about a teenage girl who leaves the back door open and gets a terrifying surprise in the middle of the night. When 15-year-old Shah arrives home just after midnight, her parents are waiting for her. She and her brother, when they knew they were late, went to their room to go to sleep. She found her parents sleeping in their room, so she decided to leave the back door open for her older brother, who was sleeping in a friend's house, so that he could enter the house without making any noise or waking her up to open it. A big mistake. In the middle of the night, the girl woke up feeling something cold and metallic on her neck. At first, she thought it was her brother playing a prank on her. She couldn't see him because it was dark. Her nose and mouth gagged. She could not even breathe. And she heard a deep, cutting voice saying, "If you make any noise, I will kill you." The girl got scared and rolled her eyes in the dark and said to herself that she could see who was doing this. There was no face, just a black mask with holes cut for the eyes, and he was holding a knife aimed at her throat. She knew her parents were sleeping in the next room. The girl tried to make as much noise as she could, but the man's hand was holding back her screams. She tried to slap him. She tried to kick. She tried to hit the wall with her foot so that her parents could hear. In the next room, her parents were sleeping, and suddenly they were awakened by some strange sounds, and they decided to check on their daughter, thinking that perhaps she was just suffering from a bad dream. When the girl's parents opened her bedroom door, they were confronted with a terrifying scene. All they can see is in a darkened room a big black thing was sitting on their daughter, and he put a knife to her throat. And as soon as he saw the knife, her father jumped on the intruder's head and struggled with him. Her mother grabbed the man's wrist and wrestled the knife to drop it from his hand. Her father managed to put his arm around the neck of the masked man and started strangling him. The girl ran and grabbed her cell phone from the table and ran outside to call the police. Her father kept the intruder after they tied him up on the bedroom floor until the police arrived. 4 minutes later, a police officer opened the bedroom door and told him not to fight. "Don't move or I'll blow your head off." The police handcuffed the intruder and pulled him out the house. When the police searched the man's truck, they found a variety of weapons and some bloody clothes. It turned out that the masked man had already killed 2 people a few days ago. The most terrifying thing about this story is that the girl would have been the 3rd victim. He's a psychopath, roaming the neighborhoods in search of open backdoors. He hunts his victims. It was said that he will be sentenced to 25 to 30 years in prison. So the point of this story is, always make sure your backdoor is secured if you don't want to be a victim of the backdoor man. Translation of the story: Backdoor. If you liked the video, do not forget to like and subscribe to receive all new things. Thanks, and see you in a new story.